A king exhumed his murdered lover, crowned her corpse queen, and then forced his horrified court to kiss her decaying hand. A brilliant, world-famous philosopher secretly married his teenage student, and when her family found out, they had him brutally castrated in the dead of night. Lovers, caught in a passionate embrace, inspired by a romantic story they were reading, were suddenly and violently murdered by a betrayed husband, their tragic tale later immortalized in one of the most famous poems ever written. These aren't plots from a dark fantasy novel. These are just glimpses into the intense, often dangerous and absolutely forbidden romances of the Middle Ages. Get ready, because things are about to get seriously dramatic. Number 6. Tristan and Isolde, doomed by a love potion they never meant to drink. Imagine being so in love that even death can't keep you apart. Literally. That's the vibe with Tristan and Isolde. A story so epic, it's become the blueprint for tragic romance. So, who were these star-crossed lovers? Tristan was a brave knight, nephew to King Mark of Cornwall. Think, strong, loyal, and really good with a sword. Isolde, often called Isolde the Fair, was an Irish princess, known for her stunning beauty and healing skills. Pretty standard medieval vips, right? Here's where it gets complicated. King Mark wanted to marry Isolde to seal a peace treaty with Ireland. And who does he send to fetch his future bride? Yep, his trusty nephew, Tristan. Awkward. Tristan, being the dutiful knight, sails to Ireland, possibly slays a dragon. Details vary, but it's always something heroic, and secures Isolde for his uncle. The voyage back to Cornwall is where everything goes sideways. Isolde's mother, a bit of a schemer, had given Isolde's handmaiden, Brangane, a powerful love potion, the plan. Isolde and King Mark were to drink it on their wedding night, ensuring they'd fall madly and eternally in love. Smart, huh? Except things didn't go according to plan. One hot day on the ship, Tristan and Isolde were thirsty. They asked for a drink. A servant, not knowing what it was, accidentally served them the love potion. Oops, one sip, and bam. They were hit with an overwhelming, irresistible, all-consuming love for each other. A love that was, you know, super forbidden, considering she was about to marry his uncle and king. Talk about bad timing. When they arrived in Cornwall, Isolde married King Mark as planned. But her heart and Tristan's belonged to each other. This kicked off a series of secret meetings, whispered words, and close calls. They were masters of sneaking around. Think hidden trysts in the royal garden, coded messages, and a whole lot of anxiety. Brangane, feeling guilty about the potion, mix-up, or perhaps just loyal, often helped them, even once taking Isolde's place in King Mark's bed on the wedding night to hide the fact Isolde wasn't a virgin because, well, Tristan. Of course, in a royal court filled with jealous nobles and gossipy servants, a secret that big couldn't stay hidden forever. King Mark wasn't stupid. He started to suspect something was up. There were whispers, accusations. One famous story tells of a treacherous dwarf who scattered flour on the floor between Tristan's bed and Isolde, hoping to catch their footprints. Tristan, ever resourceful supposedly, leaped between the beds to avoid leaving tracks, but a wound reopened, and drops of blood gave them away. Ouch! Eventually, the evidence became undeniable. King Mark was heartbroken and furious. Tristan was often banished from the court, only to find a way back to Isolde. Their love was a constant cycle of passion, danger, separation, and reunion. It was exhausting just reading about it. During one of his exiles, Tristan, trying to move on, as if married another woman, her name, Isolde of the White Hands. Yeah, really subtle, Tristan? But his heart was never in it. He couldn't forget the original Isolde, Isolde the Fair. The end of their story is pure tragedy. Tristan was gravely wounded in a battle, possibly by a poisoned weapon. Lying near death, he knew only one person could heal him, his true love, Isolde the Fair. He sent a ship to fetch her, with specific instructions. If she was on board and coming to save him, the ship should fly white sails. If she refused, or couldn't come, black sails. Isolde the Fair, still deeply in love, dropped everything and sailed to him. Meanwhile, Tristan's wife, Isolde of the White Hands, was understandably not thrilled about this whole arrangement. As the ship approached the coast, Tristan, too weak to look himself, asked his wife what color the sails were. In a moment of bitter jealousy, Isolde of the White Hands lied and told him the sails were black. Hearing this, Tristan lost all hope and died of a broken heart. Just moments later, Isolde the Fair arrived, rushed to his side and found him dead. Overcome with grief, she lay down beside him and died too. It's utterly devastating. Legend says that from Tristan's grave grew a briar vine, and from Isolde's a rose tree. These plants grew towards each other, intertwining their branches, so that even in death they could not be separated. A symbol of a love so powerful, it defied kings, society, and even life itself. Their story, whether pure legend or based on some ancient truth, echoed through the ages, inspiring countless poems, operas, and articles like this one. Number 5. Lancelot and Guinevere, the knight who loved his queen and betrayed his king. If Tristan and Isolde are the blueprint for tragic love, then Lancelot and Guinevere are the ultimate story of betrayal for passion. This one involves King Arthur, Camelot, the Knights of the Round Table, basically, the medieval list. Sir Lancelot du Lac was the knight, the best of the best. Incredibly skilled in combat, chivalrous, handsome, he was King Arthur's champion and his closest friend. Queen Guinevere was Arthur's beautiful and noble wife. On paper, it was a perfect royal setup. Arthur had his kingdom, his queen, and his loyal best knight. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, just about everything. The exact moment Lancelot and Guinevere fell for each other is a bit hazy, as legends tend to be. But fall they did, and hard. It was a slow burn, a growing admiration that eventually exploded into a passionate, secret love affair. This wasn't just any affair. This was an affair with the Queen. And not just any queen, but the wife of King Arthur, Lancelot's king and best buddy. The betrayal levels were off the charts. Their love was the ultimate forbidden fruit. Lancelot was sworn to loyalty to Arthur. Guinevere was well married to Arthur. Every stolen glance, every secret meeting, every whispered word was fraught with danger. If discovered, it wouldn't just be personal heartbreak. It could tear the entire kingdom apart. And spoiler alert, it kind of did. For years they managed to keep their affair under wraps mostly. There were close calls, of course. Knights loyal to Arthur, like Sir Aquitaine and Sir Mordred, Arthur's sneaky nephew's son, it's complicated, suspected something was up. They were jealous of Lancelot's favored status and eager to bring him down. One famous incident involves Guinevere being accused of treason. For something else, a poisoning plot she was framed for. She was sentenced to be burned at the stake. Standard medieval justice, who swoops in at the last minute to save her. Lancelot, of course. He fought his way through the king's guards, killing several knights in the process, some of whom were comrades, and rescued his queen, heroic. Yes. Complicating things with Arthur massively. The final reveal of their affair was dramatic. Aquitaine and Mordred, along with a dozen other knights, set a trap. They arranged for Arthur to be away on a hunting trip, and then burst into Guinevere's chambers, hoping to catch Lancelot with her. And catch him they did. Lancelot, though unarmed initially, fought like a demon, killed Aquitaine and many of the other knights, and managed to escape. Guinevere, however, was captured. When Arthur returned and learned the truth, he was devastated. His best friend and his wife had betrayed him. He was forced by law and honor to condemn Guinevere to death. Again. And again, Lancelot rode to her rescue, this time sparking an all-out civil war. The Fellowship of the Round Table was shattered. Knights were forced to choose sides, Arthur or Lancelot. It was a mess. While Arthur was busy dealing with Lancelot, Mordred seized his chance to usurp the throne. This led to the final tragic battle of Camlan, where Arthur and Mordred mortally wounded each other. The golden age of Camelot was over, all because of this forbidden love. So, what happened to the lovers? After Arthur's death, Guinevere, overwhelmed with guilt for the destruction their love had caused, retired to a nunnery in Amesbury. She spent the rest of her days in penance. Lancelot, also consumed by remorse, sought her out. Their final meeting was heartbreaking. Guinevere refused to see him more than once, urging him to return to his own lands and find peace. She told him they would never see each other again in this life, but hoped they would meet in the next. Lancelot, utterly broken, became a hermit and a priest, dedicating his life to prayer and atonement. He died a few years after Guinevere. Legend says he was buried with honors, some stories even claiming his grave was next to Arthur's, or that he was laid to rest at Joyous Gard, his own castle that had once been a haven for his love with Guinevere. Their love story is a powerful, painful reminder of how passion can lead to ruin. It questions loyalty, love, and duty. Was it worth it? The legends don't give an easy answer, but they sure do make for an unforgettable story of a knight who loved his queen a little too much and a queen who risked everything for that love. Number 4. Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England. The power couple whose love forged and almost broke an empire. Okay, this one is less secret whispers in the night and more epic medieval drama played out on the world stage. Eleanor of Aquitaine was not just any woman, she was one of the most powerful and wealthiest women in Europe during the Middle Ages. And her relationship with Henry II of England. It was a roller coaster of passion, politics, betrayal, and straight-up warfare. First, let's get to know Eleanor. She inherited the vast Duchy of Aquitaine in southwestern France when she was just a teenager, making her a very eligible bachelorette. Her first marriage was to King Louis VII of France. It wasn't exactly a match made in heaven. Eleanor was vibrant, intelligent, and opinionated. Louis, pious and a bit dull. She even went on crusade with him, which was pretty scandalous for the time, and there were rumors of her getting a little too friendly with her uncle Raymond of Poitiers in Antioch-Juicy. After 15 years and 2 daughters, their marriage was annulled on the grounds of consanguinity. They were too closely related, a common medieval excuse for we don't like each other anymore. Eleanor, now single and still fabulously wealthy and powerful, was hot property. Enter Henry Plantagenet, soon to be King Henry II of England. He was 11 years younger than Eleanor, energetic, ambitious, and known for his fiery temper. Just 8 weeks after her annulment from Louis, Eleanor married Henry Scandal. Louis was furious. Henry was already a major rival, and now he controlled Aquitaine through Eleanor. This marriage basically set the stage for centuries of conflict between England and France. At first, their relationship seemed like a true partnership, a passionate one even. They had a bunch of kids together, 8 in total, including future kings, Richard the Lionheart, and John, yes, that king, John of Magna Carta fame. Together, they ruled a massive territory, the Angevin Empire, stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees. They were the ultimate medieval power couple. But, and there's always a but, power and passion can be a volatile mix. Henry was a notorious womanizer. His most famous affair was with fair Rosamund, Clifford, and legend says Eleanor was not amused. One tale, though likely just a legend even, has Eleanor poisoning Rosamund in a fit of jealousy. While that's probably not true, it shows the kind of intense emotions people associated with their relationship. As their sons grew older, things got really messy. Eleanor, fiercely protective of her son's rights, especially her favorite, Richard, began to clash with Henry. She encouraged her sons to rebel against their father when Henry planned to divide his territories in a way they felt was unfair, or when he delayed giving them real power. In 1173, 3 of their sons, backed by Eleanor and King Louis VII of France, Eleanor's ex, keeping it all in the family drama, launched a massive revolt against Henry. This was known as the Great Revolt. Henry, being a formidable ruler and military strategist, eventually crushed the rebellion. And he was not happy with Eleanor's role in it, his solution. He imprisoned her for 16 years. 16. She was moved between various castles in England and France, kept under lock and key by her own husband. Imagine going from being one of the most powerful women in Europe to a political prisoner. The forbidden aspect here shifted from a scandalous marriage to a wife actively subverting her king and husband, leading to her being forcibly restrained. It was only when Henry II died in 1189 that Eleanor was finally freed by her son Richard the Lionheart, who became king. And did she retire quietly? Heck no. Eleanor, then in her late 60s, jumped right back into politics. She ruled as regent while Richard was off on the Third Crusade, skillfully managed the kingdom, ransomed Richard when he was captured, and secured the succession for her youngest son John after Richard's death. She was a force of nature until she died in her 80s. Their story is less about secret, tender moments and more about a colossal clash of wills. Their initial attraction and marriage were certainly against the grain of political alliances at the time, making it a forbidden match in the eyes of the French king. Later, their love soured into a bitter rivalry, with Eleanor's actions becoming forbidden in the sense of a queen rebelling against her king. It's a romance that shaped empires, fueled wars, and gave us a queen who refused to be silenced, even by the king she once loved. Number 3. Paolo Malatesta and Francesca da Rimini, murdered for love and immortalized in hell. This story is short, brutal, and incredibly famous, mostly thanks to the poet Dante Alighieri, who gave these lovers a prime spot in his Inferno. If you're caught having an affair in the Middle Ages, this is pretty much the worst-case scenario. Francesca da Rimini was a noblewoman from Ravenna, Italy, in the late 13th century. As was common for noble families, her marriage was arranged for political reasons. She was married to Giovanni Malatesta, also known as Gianciotto, meaning crippled John. Charming, right? Giovanni was a brave soldier, but was described as deformed and ill-tempered. Francesca was, by all accounts, beautiful and refined. Here's where the trouble starts. Giovanni had a younger brother, Paolo Malatesta. Paolo was handsome, charming, and everything Giovanni wasn't. He was known as Il Bello, the beautiful. You can probably see where this is going. Francesca and Paolo found themselves drawn to each other. It was the classic tale of a woman in a difficult, loveless marriage, finding solace and passion with someone else. Someone who unfortunately happened to be her husband's brother. That's a big no-no, then and now. Their affair was secret, of course. They had to be incredibly careful. But desire, as it often does, made them reckless. The most famous account of their affair comes from Dante's Divine Comedy. In the second circle of hell, reserved for the lustful Dante, meets the souls of Paolo and Francesca, forever swept together in an infernal storm. Francesca tells Dante their story. One day, she and Paolo were reading a book together for pleasure. The book. It was about Lancelot and Guinevere, specifically the part about Lancelot's first kiss with Queen Guinevere. Art imitating life, or life imitating art, that leads to tragedy. When we read how the longed-for smile was kissed by so great a lover, this one, who never shall be parted from me, kissed my mouth all trembling, a Galahaut to go between in the Lancelot story, was the book and he who wrote it. That day we read no more. Chills, right. They were reading about a forbidden kiss, and it led to their own. That day, we read no more. It's one of the most poignant lines in literature. Their bliss was short-lived. Giovanni Malatesta, either through suspicion or because someone tipped him off, discovered them together. The accounts vary slightly, but the most common version is that he found them in Francesca's bedroom, possibly in an embrace or even in bed. Enraged by the betrayal, Giovanni didn't hesitate. He drew his sword, and in a fit of jealous fury killed them both on the spot. Some stories say Paolo tried to escape through a trapdoor, but got caught, and Francesca threw herself in front of him to save him, leading to them being impaled by the same sword, utterly brutal. This likely happened around the year 1285. Their deaths were a scandal, but it was Dante's poetic retelling that cemented their fate as tragic romantic figures. By placing them in hell, Dante condemns their sin of lust. Yet, his portrayal is also incredibly sympathetic. He even faints from pity after hearing Francesca's story. Paolo and Francesca became symbols of passionate, illicit love, cut short by violence. Their story resonated because it was so human, the desire for connection, the thrill of the forbidden, and the devastating consequences. They weren't kings or queens changing empires, but their intensely personal tragedy, amplified by Dante's genius, made them immortal. A stark reminder that, in the Middle Ages, love could literally cost you your life, and then some. Number 2. Heloise and Abelard. The scholar, his student, and the price of passion. This is one of the most famous, and arguably most tragic, true love stories of the Middle Ages. It's got everything. Brilliant minds, secret love, forbidden marriage, shocking violence, and heartbreaking letters that have survived for centuries. Peter Abelard, active in the early 12th century in Paris, was basically a rock star philosopher and theologian. He was brilliant, magic, a bit arrogant, and students flocked from all over Europe to hear him teach. Think of him as the leading intellectual celebrity of his day. Heloise d'Argentou was a young woman living in Paris under the care of her uncle Fulbert, a canon at Notre Dame Cathedral. She was exceptionally intelligent, known for her learning in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, highly unusual for a woman at that time. Fulbert, proud of his niece's intellect, and perhaps wanting to further her education or show her off, hired the most famous teacher in Paris to be her private tutor, Peter Abelard. Abelard was around 37 or 38. Heloise was likely in her late teens, maybe 17 or 18. What happened next was in Abelard's own words, from his autobiographical letter, Historia Calamitatum, or The Story of My Misfortunes, quite calculated on his part. He admitted he deliberately set out to seduce Heloise. He moved into Fulbert's house as a lodger, and under the guise of study, their lessons soon turned to love. Our hands strayed oftener to bosoms than to books. Abelard later wrote, "Ooh la la." Their affair was passionate and intense, intellectually and physically. They were equals in mind, and their love for each other was deep. But, of course, it was completely forbidden. Abelard was a cleric in minor orders, expected to remain celibate if he wanted to advance in the church hierarchy. A public relationship, especially with a student, would ruin his career. Inevitably, Heloise became pregnant. This was a disaster. To try and manage the scandal, Abelard secretly sent Heloise away to his family in Brittany, where she gave birth to a son whom they named Astrolabe. Yes, like the astronomical instrument, very on brand for a family of scholars. Abelard, perhaps feeling some guilt or wanting to do right by Heloise, proposed a secret marriage. Heloise remarkably argued against it. She knew it would destroy his career. She said she would rather be his mistress than his wife, to not hinder his path. She even cited classical authors on the burdens of marriage for a philosopher. But Abelard insisted, wanting to appease Fulbert. They were secretly married in Paris. But secret marriages rarely stay secret for long. Fulbert, despite agreeing to the secrecy, started spreading the word, perhaps to salvage his own honor or to pressure Abelard. When Heloise denied the marriage to protect Abelard, Fulbert became abusive towards her. To protect her, Abelard sent Heloise to a convent at Argenteuil, not necessarily to become a nun, but for safety. Fulbert, however, interpreted this as Abelard trying to abandon Heloise and force her into a nun's life, to be rid of her. He was beyond furious. Consumed by a desire for revenge, Fulbert, along with some of his relatives and hired thugs, enacted a truly horrific plan. One night, they broke into Abelard's room while he slept, overpowered him, and castrated him. This brutal act effectively ended Abelard's career ambitions within the mainstream church hierarchy, though he did continue to teach and write. The public humiliation was immense. For Abelard, it was a divine punishment for his lust. He became a monk, and he compelled Heloise, who was devastated and still deeply in love with him, to become a nun. This was a source of great sorrow for Heloise, who felt she took the veil not out of religious devotion, but out of obedience to Abelard. Years later, Abelard wrote his Historia Calamitatum. When Heloise read it, it reopened old wounds and prompted an extraordinary exchange of letters between them. These letters are incredible documents, passionate, intellectual, raw, and deeply moving. Heloise writes of her enduring love for Abelard, her bitterness at their fate, and her questioning of God's justice. Abelard's replies are more focused on spiritual guidance, urging her to accept their fate and devote herself to God. Their love story is tragic, not just because of the violence and separation, but because of the profound intellectual and emotional connection that was so cruelly thwarted. Heloise, a brilliant mind, arguably stifled by the conventions of her time and the choices made for her, remains a powerful figure. Abelard, for all his initial arrogance, suffered immensely. They both became respected figures in monastic life. Heloise eventually became an abbess, known for her wisdom and administrative skills. Abelard continued to write influential theological works, though he often ran into trouble with church authorities for his controversial ideas. They died many years apart, but were eventually buried together. Their tomb is now in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, a place of pilgrimage for lovers and scholars alike. Their story is a stark testament to the dangers of forbidden love in a rigid society and the enduring power of human connection against all odds. Number 1. Ines de Castro and Peter I of Portugal, the queen who was crowned after death. Get ready for the most gothic, dramatic, and frankly, slightly terrifying forbidden romance on this list. We're talking love, murder, a king's grief-fueled rage, and a coronation for a corpse. Yes, you read that right. Ines de Castro was a Galician noblewoman who arrived in Portugal around 1340 as a lady-in-waiting to Constanza Manuel, the wife of Dom Pedro Peter, the heir to the Portuguese throne. Pedro was the son of King Afonso IV of Portugal. It was pretty much love at first sight for Pedro and Ines. Unfortunately, Pedro was married to Constanza, and Ines was her attendant. This was forbidden on multiple levels. Not only was adultery a sin and a social scandal, but Ines also had powerful brothers, the Castro clan, whose growing influence at the Portuguese court through Ines worried King Afonso and his counselors. They feared that if Pedro favored Ines and her family, it could drag Portugal into Castilian political squabbles or even lead to a Castro-controlled puppet king if Ines's children were to inherit the throne. Despite the dangers, Pedro and Ines began a passionate affair. They were deeply in love, and it wasn't a secret for long. King Afonso IV was seriously unhappy about this. He tried to put a stop to it. He banished Ines from the court in 1344, hoping that out of sight would mean out of mind for Pedro. It didn't work. Pedro and Ines continued their relationship, meeting secretly. When Constanza died in 1345, after childbirth, Pedro felt free to be with Ines. He refused to marry any of the princesses his father suggested, wanting only Ines. He brought her back from her exile, and they settled down in Coimbra, living openly as a couple. They had several children together, and Pedro considered Ines his true wife, though the legality of any secret marriage between them is debated by historians. This defiance enraged King Afonso and his nobles. They saw Ines and her children as a threat to the legitimate line of succession. Pedro already had a son, Ferdinand, with Constanza, and to the stability of Portugal. The Castro brothers were still a concern. The councillors hammered away at Afonso, arguing that Ines had to be eliminated for the good of the kingdom. For years, Afonso resisted taking drastic action, perhaps out of reluctance to hurt his son so deeply. But the pressure mounted. Finally, in 1355, while Pedro was away on a hunting trip, King Afonso was persuaded by three of his noblemen, Pero Coelho, Alvaro Goncalves, and Diogo Lopes Pacheco, that the time had come. The king gave his consent, or at least turned a blind eye. The three assassins went to Coimbra, to the monastery of Santa Clara, where Ines was living with her children. Accounts say Ines, realizing they were there to kill her, pleaded for her life. She supposedly begged the king, who some sources say was present, others say just the assassins went, to have mercy, presenting her children to him, reminding him they were his grandchildren. Afonso was reportedly moved and almost called it off, but his counselors stiffened his resolve. Ines de Castro was brutally murdered, stabbed to death in front of her terrified children. When Pedro returned and found his beloved Ines dead, his grief was immense, and it quickly turned into a furious desire for revenge. He was utterly devastated and enraged by his father's betrayal. He launched a revolt against King Afonso, plunging part of the country into a brief civil war. Though peace was eventually negotiated before Afonso's death, Pedro never forgave his father or the assassins. In 1357, King Afonso IV died, and Pedro became King Peter I of Portugal. Now, he had the power to exact his full revenge. Two of the assassins, Pedro Coelho and Alvaro Goncalves, who had fled to Castile, were eventually extradited back to Portugal. The third, Diogo Lopes Pacheco, escaped. What Peter did to them was legendarily gruesome. He supposedly declared he would personally rip their hearts out, one from the chest, one from the back, because they had ripped out his own heart when they killed Ines. And according to some rather grisly chronicles, he did just that, or had it done, even taking a bite from one of the hearts during a banquet. While this detail might be an embellishment to emphasize his fury, there's no doubt their execution was brutal. But Peter's most famous act regarding Ines was yet to come. In 1360, he made a stunning declaration. He swore that he had secretly married Ines de Castro years before, making her his lawful wife and therefore the rightful queen of Portugal. He had witnesses attest to this secret ceremony. And then came the truly macabre part that cemented their story in legend. Peter allegedly had Ines's body exhumed from her tomb in Coimbra. Her decaying corpse was dressed in royal robes, adorned with jewels, and placed on a throne beside him. He then supposedly compelled the entire Portuguese court, nobles, clergy, and knights to file past her enthroned corpse and kiss her skeletal hand, acknowledging her as their queen. Imagine the horror. This act, whether entirely factual or exaggerated over time, symbolized Peter's undying love, his defiance of those who opposed their union, and his ultimate chilling assertion of Ines's royal status. Peter then commissioned two magnificent marble tombs to be built at the monastery of Alcobaça, one for Ines and one for himself. They are masterpieces of Gothic sculpture. He ordered them to be placed foot to foot, so that on the day of judgment, when they rose from their graves, the first thing they would see would be each other. The inscription on her tomb reads, Ate, Osim du Murndai, until the end of the world. Peter I ruled for another 10 years, known as Peter the Just, or Peter the Cruel, depending on who you asked. He was known for his strict, sometimes brutal application of justice, but also for moments of popular fairness. He never remarried. The story of Ines de Castro and Peter I is Portugal's most cherished and tragic love story. It's a powerful tale of passionate love defying social and political barriers, the cruelty of power politics, and a grief so profound it led to acts both romantic and terrifying. The image of a dead queen on her throne is an unforgettable, if chilling, testament to a love that even death itself could not entirely conquer, at least not in the heart of a grieving king.